So if you have some questions or inquiry about your practice or what we've been mentioning about practice, now is a good time to raise those. One of the benefits of having an open conversation is that your question, if you're willing to raise it, is then something that everyone can get something from. So if you can, that's helpful for everyone then.
Put up your hand.
Oh yes, and if you have something to say or ask, there's a microphone that will float around in the room automatically. Yeah.
Well, when I heard about this class that was offered, that was described this morning, what is that? What are you looking for, Michael? Hi.
I'm looking for the speaker.
That's me. I
Oh,
never
yeah, there you
speak,
are.
so it's
Robert. Yeah,
fooling you, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's this class
I
you
got
can
you.
take because you see meditation as an obligation, and you have to sort of make yourself do it. And I thought, oh man, I wish they had the other class, the class that I could go to, because I think the rest of my life feels like that. And if I could just meditate, if you just let me meditate, but I have to figure out where I live and get something to eat, maybe have some friends, or I'm going to be weird, do you have that class?
I don't know where that class is either. I think, yeah. Yeah, you can join a monastery. I'm not sure there's a guarantee even there.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like I think it's a great question. One of the kind of paradoxes that we all experience at various times is that at some point the recommendation to make a commitment to your practice is on the table, and it's not uncommon for us to make that commitment, partly because we want to do it. We know that if we could do it, it would be a good thing, and partly because people are watching. It's sort of like, you do it because other people are doing it and making commitments and doing a certain number of things maybe to make some kind of a commitment. And in my experience, both in terms of experience of others and experience for myself, is that just about inevitably, with rare exceptions, and there are some, we don't do it as well as we hoped we would do it. And that's a difficult issue. So the story that we sometimes like to share about it is just in terms of getting a sense of why it's important, why it's difficult in this particular culture as opposed to other cultures. So my guess is it's difficult everywhere, but it manifests in slightly different ways. So some years ago, it's probably 20 years or 15 or something like that, Bokar Rinpoche in India inspired a fairly good-sized number of people to make commitments to engage in practices in a kind of order, like do this, meet this commitment, and then do this thing, and you know about all that. So I remember we were doing a retreat on Salt Spring Island in Canada, in Vancouver, and there was this one man who was there who has now passed away, but he was a successful restaurant guy. He had a number of restaurants and all. I say that only because he was intelligent, he was a hard worker, and he'd made the commitment to do certain things. And he approached me during the beginning of the retreat at that time, and he said, I don't know that I should be here. I'm not sure that I'm qualified to be here. And I asked him why, and he said, well, I didn't meet my commitment. Well, the commitment was to do 10,000 of a certain practice that had a fairly large physical component to do also as part of it. And 10,000 was the amount that he had committed to, that we were actually asked to do. And so he took the commitment joyfully. And then he says, I failed to meet the commitment, and so I don't feel like I'm worthy to be here. And when I asked him, well, how many did you do? I expected he might say like 5 instead of 10,000 or something. 9,880, something like that, like this amazing thing that most of us, you would think you would just write it off and say, good enough, you know? It's not a tax return. So get on with it. But he was literally ready to leave. All I had to say was, yeah, that's not so good. Better you go. And he would have just left. And for sure, we never would have seen him again. So that's the trial for us, is that we almost always wish that we could do more, that we did more practice, that we integrated in our life more, like all these things. And we almost never do as good as we had hoped to do. And the problem with that is made clear by looking at how the Tibetans relate to this. Because this is a piece of our problem, is that we measure ourselves by other people's standards. And my experience with Tibetans has been, and it isn't, you might think that I have a lot of experience with that, but I don't. But the few people that I have had this experience with, and that other people have said, a Tibetan can go to this seminar with Bokha Rinpoche and is alive, commit to do 10,000, and do half of that, let's say, and feel no guilt whatsoever. And if somebody asked about it, they'd say, I never would have done 5,000 if I hadn't made the commitment. Good enough. Next time maybe I'll do a little better. And it's just like left, there it is. And it's just difficult for most people in our culture to accept that halfway. When actually we can all totally relate to also that making the commitment dragged me through a big chunk of something that I wouldn't have done, that I wanted to do. And so when it's done, I honor the tradition, the whole thing, and let's move on to the next thing. And we're kind of dragging our tails behind us, like, I'm not really sure I should be here. This is how, and maybe I'm the one person in all of samsara that doesn't have an awakened mind waiting to be woken up. And maybe that's why I sleep in the morning somehow. Jeez. And so I think that it's great to laugh about it, and yet it's a real issue. It's a real issue. Especially in our highly competitive society. We sometimes get into the place of asking the question, how many have you done? which actually deserves to be, punched in the nose, kind of like, And that can be helpful. Like somebody says, I did 8,000 and you did 5, and then you might say, well, like, how did you overcome your resistance or whatever it was? It often turns into a competition. And not always, but I consider that personally to be the worst outcome. A competition to be a better meditator, to meditate more hours, to do all these things. Are like, how many good things did you do today? Oh, like five, and I only did 2. Like, oh, thanks a lot. And we kind of need to get it out of our system. And at the same time, this is a piece of the puzzle that we have, is that we need to find a way to engage in the practice outside of being here together in the shrine room and receiving teachings, and in the moment of something said, we feel inspired. And of course, we hope that the inspiration will just last for the rest of our life. And it doesn't. By lunchtime, we can't find it. And yet, the inspiration was authentic. It wasn't like that was phony. So we tend to do that to ourselves too. A real inspiration, you see, would be easy to carry forward. I think that we have to find the trick in small ways that we already do. Something we already do that we can just add an enhancement to. So, for example, I'll use the way that I betray myself. Since I have so many examples of that. And one of them is I don't get enough exercise. So when I run down here from where I live. It's only literally a 5-minute jog. But I do that 5-minute jog. And then I think, I could do twice. That makes it a little longer. That's good. So then I do it twice. And then, of course, I don't do it. Well, that was good. Good enough, okay. Then a week later, I think, why don't I do it twice? It's not just about our commitment in the Dharma. It's just generally how it is. I think we hurt ourselves when we make a commitment that we cannot keep, and we develop a habit of making a commitment that we cannot keep. So for me, I feel like it's better to not make the commitment. The commitment doesn't drive me personally. What drives me personally is a sense of if I can raise my awareness in the presence of others, and I don't mean in this room, I mean just generally speaking with other people, and to hold the view of just intending to do something positive for every person that we meet. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But just to hold an intention that we kind of naturally feel okay with. I wish that these 6 people over here that I don't like, well, actually, I used to like them, but I think they don't like me, so I don't like them back. So we get into these things. So there's a lot of antidotes in the Dharma where we can say the issue here is you believe your own namtok, your own kind of like distracted mind. What we say to ourselves becomes this inherent truth. And we know it's not true. We need to start just encouraging ourselves to not believe what we throw up as somehow that's the real truth. When what we're encouraged to do everywhere in the Dharma is treat other people with kindness, with compassion, try to generate joy in their presence, like all these things. We can pick even just one of those things and try to do them, or all of them at once, and try to bring them into every circumstance. One way to do that is you start by saying, okay, now I'm walking out the front door. There's birds on the high wire above the street. And so you stop for a moment and you look at the birds and you just give yourself the chance to give rise to the wish that they also are sentient beings. They're not just a piece of dead paper blowing around. They're actually sentient beings. And they need to eat, and they need to be out of the cold, and they need a lot of things in order to feel some sense of well-being that I cannot imagine what it is, but I'm sure that it's there. And so we make the wish that they would be free of that. We move on. As soon as we've done that, make the aspiration. In the next hour, I will do that again. There'll be something. Then you go in, you're going to buy something. So you meet somebody, you try to do something that is friendly, that feels nice, even just wishing them to have a nice day, and even saying something corny, but having a connection with somebody and holding the wish for their goodness. If you could do that once an hour during the day, even if you only did it 8 hours a day, because we're kind of 8 hours a day people, you might get 8 of those in by the end of the day. And I can tell you from my own experience, if you succeed in 8 of those in a day, you feel different at the end of the day. You feel like, I'm doing it. And as soon as you have that sense of self-empowerment, pretty soon you're doing more. Pretty soon you're doing it more often. Pretty soon you don't have to remind yourself. And, like we were talking about earlier, you can do that practice for every person that you run into. At the end of the day, guess who feels better? You actually have no idea how the people are that you met who are maybe saying behind your back, what a schmuck. You know, it's just like, this person comes in, says this thing, and it's like, I can tell, they don't care. But you know whether you cared or not. And at the end of the day, even nothing else but just a sense of, I changed the nature of my day. My day is different. So tomorrow I will do the same or something different, and over time it will be my habit. So Buddhists aren't supposed to have habits, or they're not supposed to honor them, but actually we all know that is not true. We are encouraged over and over to have deep habits of sitting down and practicing in order to overcome all the other habits. But that habit, if you don't have it, you will not overcome the causes of suffering. So it's kind of like disposable habits. You know, you can have habits and you know that it's disposable at the other end of the path. You don't need to carry it all the way. Okay?
So does that answer the question that was posed at the beginning about don't we ever get a practice for ourselves?
Who knows?
Because we are. Well, I know that the correct answer is we are practicing for ourselves and others all the time. But to do the practice that you just suggested, at the end of the day, who feels better? You do.
Yeah. And you feel especially good if you did it for others.
Yeah.
Now, if you do it for yourself, you can still feel good, but I think it's a little bit tricky here, because when we do the aspiration bodhicitta, we're always aspiring to give rise to the awakened mind in order to benefit others. It doesn't say anywhere in there in order to make yourself feel bad. This is a simple formula, actually. We already know how it is that our interplay with other people, just our conversations, or the time that we spend together, we know what makes those things work well and what makes them not work so well. I mean, we're professionals at it, really. What we're not professionals at in many cases is, even when we know what will generate joy for others and for ourselves, we forget to do what needs to be done. And then we beat ourselves up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And that's also a problem. It would be better to just give rise to the understanding, I'm just like everybody else. So that kind of levels the playing field too. I'm like everybody else. We're all forgetting. And when we all forget too much, pretty soon we're fighting. Other things are happening. And then I look at that and I think, we didn't have to do that. And everybody would agree, yeah, we didn't have to do it, but we're doing it, so bam. You know? So it's like, we're just I think it's one of the things that as a community we can do. We can encourage each other to be kind to each other, no matter what the circumstance. Okay?
So I have a question. It is so true that we set our direction and then forget. So we often talk about that here as habit, you know. Something you said just now is so powerful. Well, we didn't have to fight, we didn't have to go to war, but we did, so pow, you know. And I'm wondering, from your experience, about the habit. We've talked about the habit that we want to overcome, but about what more about that forgetfulness in the mind? What's your experience of seeing it, overcoming it? The constant forgetfulness. I wish I'd done it, but I didn't. Somehow it does weaken, but I don't see how it does. The forgetfulness weakens. And, you know, I mean, as people practice a long time, then they practice more. But what do you know about that thing, that unthing thing, that part of the mind, that mental whatever?
The forgetfulness.
Yeah, why? Both why is it and how do you overcome it?
It's funny you raise that question, which of course is a good question, partly because we all forget. Those who have the best memory forget too. I have to dip into my own experience to see exactly why that happens and why it used to happen in different ways and happens in different ways now. I forget more now than I did 20 years ago, just generally speaking. But I forget less about the Dharma than I ever have. So, and that is an issue of habit. So I don't think of it as habit. And maybe that's because of other training earlier in my life, that you accomplish things when you have a vision. If you don't have a vision, then it's just kind of like a desire for something this afternoon. Like, I'd like to have split pea soup for lunch. I wouldn't call that a vision. That's just a pending desire for lunch, and it's a difference. The vision is like the teacher who once told me, every day you should go into the marketplace somewhere and make somebody happy. And at the time, he was saying that because I was saying, I don't know how to build the habit of just wanting to be a useful force for goodness. How do you do that? It's easy to give rise to the aspiration at this very moment, like, well, of course. And then 5 minutes later, we're in the restroom. What do you do in the restroom that is actually benefiting all sentient beings? And I'm glad you're laughing, because there is something to do. It's definitely something to do. Well, it's from the little to the big. So you start, when he said, go into the marketplace and make somebody feel good. It's like, I was not the kind of person who walks up to somebody and just talks to them. In fact, it may seem today like it's unlikely, but I don't think anyone was more of an introvert than me. So the idea of talking to somebody when I didn't need to talk to them was sort of like sticking needles in my body. And so, but I had to do it. So I believed when he said to do this, that was going to be really helpful. Now it's so clear that the way to hold the vision, so I got to speak from my own side because this doesn't work for everybody. The way to hold the vision for me is I remind myself probably 100 times every day about the truth of interdependence. That I pick up this book and I immediately see, like, there's a Chenrezig book sitting right here. And then my mind goes, are we supposed to do Chenrezig today? And then I think, no, that's not right. But I have it in my hand, so I think, truth of interconnectedness, open it. Take a look in it. Whoa. Interesting. Every time I pick this book up, I see something I didn't see before. So we're not supposed to take these things into the bathroom. This is a Tibetan thing, big thing. Don't take this into the bathroom, and don't leave one in the bathroom if you do. Because one of our Tibetan friends will come in and see it and feel like somebody does not care about the practice of Chenrezig. So we don't do that. So actually, I found that to be really useful. Because enough people in the Dharma I see, or they come and see me, or I go and see them, and many of them will feel offended if this book is left in the wrong place. So therefore, I have something to pay attention to that now is automatic. Now I don't just leave it around somewhere. Now I pick it up. So then I think, well, that's a pretty good habit. Now I pick it up. Every time I pick it up, I have something in my mind that says something like, do you remember this piece of the practice? And what I'm really doing is saying, you have forgotten a little piece in the practice. So then I start to look through it, and half the time I can find it. And then I read it, and then I think, then I'm sort of drawn into reading another page, and pretty soon read the book again. So, habits. Every time that you make a habit to practice the Dharma, to generate something in the four immeasurables, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, so easy to remember. Every time that you even just recall those things, your mind changes. Does it not? I mean, just obviously. You might say, well, not much. That's okay. It changes. The more it changes, every time that you see somebody and have an interface, that change communicates. So let's not talk about high spiritual things. The invisible nature of this and that go together, and special days in the year, these things happen more and all. Those things don't sing to me, so I don't do it. But I know that if I think to myself, today I must meet somebody and do something that makes them feel good. So once I had done that for about 2 weeks, the experience of it was so good. I never stopped. I still do it every day. At least one person. And if the day comes to an end, I make a phone call. And it's always with at least a laugh. Then I say, thank you, you've helped me fulfill my commitment today. And they'll say, what was your commitment? And I said, my commitment was what we just did. That was it. And there's no knowledge of what it was, but often in the Dharma, there's power in keeping your practice secret so that you kind of keep it contained. It doesn't just leak out in small ways and rivulets here and there. Instead, you have the thing to do, you do it, and if it benefits not only you, but somebody else, then you're in it. Why would you do something else? Just do it. Just keep doing it. So we sit down and we practice meditation. So this is the thing. We practice for the benefit of others. So everyone would like to benefit others. Maybe not, but I think in a certain way, everyone would love to be as good as Mother Teresa. And so it's interesting to ask the question, why is that? And why would you even hold that aspiration? Or anything like that? And I think it's because many people, maybe those of us who have met Mother Teresa especially, then you think that, I wish I could do that. I can't do that, but I wish I could do that. But I might be able to do this. And then, so now you have a kind of like, you can't quite forget who that person was that you met. And you can't quite live up to the expectation that you're actually going to do what that person did, which really isn't the point anyway. But you can hold the aspiration. And when you hold the aspiration, something changes. Every time you recall it, something changes. It's like another brick. It's another grain of sand in that direction. And little by little, it just becomes a habit of goodness. You just feel like that was really good. Really good. Sometimes when you think, I need to benefit one person today, sometimes the benefit is much greater than you imagined. And you can't quite do that every day, but you do something that you can. So you sit down and you meditate, and you know when you meditate, something happens. Even if you fail, even if your mind is like totally distracted and you're carried away, you still have the wish to do it to benefit others. There's no need to lose that, no matter how distracted your mind is. You can always hold that. You can always ask someone out of that wish to be benefiting somebody, how's your day? And then when they answer, add something to it and it's done. Easy. Corny, perhaps, but helpful in establishing the habit. Okay, how are we doing?
if one is inclined to be one's own worst critic, even much more so than what others would perceive,
Yeah.
what is the trick, or are there many tricks to overcome that habit?
Well, I can think of a bunch of things. And knowing you as well as I do, which is enough to feel from my side that you don't deserve to be your own harshest critic. I'll guess that if you had an antidote, a means by which to overcome the self-judgment, and that means worked a little bit, that you would be able to nurture and master that. So it might require a little more of a conversation. At some time maybe we could sit down and do exactly that. So I mean to say that in the mode of inviting it. There's nothing particularly special about what you're saying. You know, it's like this is we are the culture really of self-judgment. And I think in many spiritual traditions, self-judgment also is even considered a virtue. In our tradition, that is not a virtue. We need to work on that, because our aspiration is wholly positive. Without that aspiration, of course, then it really doesn't matter. We're not interested in doing something else anyway. But you raise the question because you're feeling blocked from engaging and the things that you feel would be good to do. And otherwise, you wouldn't say it. Yeah, we need set up conversation. I can't quite see you because there's a light behind you. But I'm Robert, I'm asking, just do you agree?
My name is Greg.
Oh, you're Rick?
Greg.
Greg.
Yes.
I thought Robert, okay. Robert had talked in the beginning. Okay.
When you said you thought you
Okay.
knew me well, I said, wow, you're very perceptive.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. All right. That's only mildly embarrassing. But actually, I mean, it's the same situation. We have many of us, and it's in a certain way, it may apply to the majority of us, we have a lot of support for self-criticism. A lot of support for self-criticism. And often the self-criticism, we learn it in a way which has no balance. No balance with building a sense of confidence and value. Like I'm a human being, I deserve to be able to do something positive for myself and for others. So maybe in the beginning we try to do it for ourselves, but from the spiritual perspective, we really need to land it on the value of others so that we can reflect that. So it takes two. It's difficult to feel value when we're completely outside of the connection with others. It's not just an issue of loneliness. It's really within the context of the practice. So I speak, this is really just from my own experience. The more that I can give rise to feeling a sense of value for others, the more that I feel worthy of that value myself. It's again, it's a piece of this thing we call the truth of interdependence. Like I have a positive wish for you, and I hold that wish is like an elixir. It has its kind of own life, not in some mysterious way like I wish that you just experienced all of the causes of happiness and well-being and it was never compromised. Just making that wish doesn't make that happen in somebody else's stream of consciousness. But making the wish and holding it changes the wisher. It changes me. Then my connection to you or anybody else is changed in that way. It sounds subtle. And it usually is, but it sometimes is not subtle. Sometimes it's quite revealing and helpful in ways that one might not have expected. You know, a lot of this is an issue of getting started. So what we do with the practice of calm abiding. We sit down, we have a few instructions, we start to do it, we find it difficult or easy, whatever it is, and we look for more instruction, more help to gain more confidence so that the mind can be more stable and we can do more of the meditation that we're trying to do. And along the way, we inevitably have to get more help. And generally what we say is that if you need help and you ask for it, asking for help is like a gift. So to the person that we ask help from, that is a gift, because it's an opportunity to manifest that bodhicitta. And often we can't figure out how to manifest it, what to do, in order to have a sense that we even know what it is. So I'll leave it at the same place. Sometimes it's helpful to sit down and just look at each other and have a conversation that is not a formula. Simple. Walk around the block or something. You have to start somewhere. And starting is often difficult, but often it's the easy part too. It's kind of like those 10,000 prostrations. The first 10, like, leave you feeling like this is going to be easy. And then it just kind of gets more difficult. And sometimes you break through it and it does become easy. But often it becomes debilitating. And this is where this thing we call Sangha, like the community, everybody engaged in this thing together, not like you meet and do it together necessarily, but in some cases where the meditation has a physical component, people do get together and do that thing together as a means of support when we all know this is difficult. And I think that this, what you're raising, really no matter who raises it, I think a lot of what we experience as troublesome rests right in the middle of the culture that we're in. And it's nobody's fault. It's just, it's kind of like if you're soaking in cold water, you get cold. So some warmth, just in terms of ordinary relating, like in a conversation or having a cup of tea together, can break something so that it changes a little bit, and then we have a way to move forward. What do you think?
It's worth a shot.
Virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception.